Hello Fix fans, and we're in the house, not the shed. It's snowing outside, it's a very snowy day, and I want to fly my toy quadcopter. This is a Mobula 7 ELRS, and you will have seen from the title of this video that this thing is an absolute tank. I'm a beginner at flying FPV. I've had quadcopters before, the type that you fly line of sight toy ones, like the Cyma X5 and Cheerson CX10. Great little quads. They haven't got the goggles, so they're not quite as easy to fly, in my opinion. Much easier to fly FPV than it is to fly line of sight, I think. And also these fly in full acro mode, so you can do flippy whippy woo bars and all sorts of stuff that you can't do with your toy quadcopters without pressing the special flippy whippy woo bar button. And we're talking about this guy because it's the most recommended beginner quad. I've been flying this now for probably about a month, and I've been absolutely smashing it. Completely smashing it. We'll have a little crash reel in a minute. So in the UK, when you fly one of these things, because it's got a camera on it and you're flying FPV, you have to fly it with a spotter. That's what the rules say, just got to do it. So you go out to the park with your spotter, and maybe you hear your spotter say, "Tree," because they've seen it heading towards a tree. It's usually too late then, and I understand that flying quads safely means you don't hit things and obstacles, but we're talking about a 22-gram whoop. It's not going to damage anything or anybody, hopefully. So you hear your spotter say, "Whoa, tree," or "climbing frame," or whatever obstacle you're trying to fly around, but it's usually too late by then, and you slam this thing into it, and it goes pretty fast. I reckon it goes a good sort of 10-20 miles an hour maybe, especially if it's in a dive. It goes much quicker than that, and it's very easy to get yourself into trouble with one of these, particularly if you're a beginner. So what I'll do is I'll show you how my first sort of maybe few weeks looked by way of a crash reel for a minute, as seen from the DVR inside my goggles. It's not the best quality, but it is pretty entertaining. But when we've had a look at that, we'll come back and we'll discuss what's happened to this now, how smashed up it is, and whether it's actually working or not. At the moment, I've had, like as I say, I've had it about a month, maybe 6 weeks, and I've been flying it daily and crashing it several times daily. It seems to be holding up quite well, bar a couple of things. We'll deal with those in a minute, but this is basically just one session, perhaps two, of bad flying that I have done. Let's fire up the crash reel. All right, and we're back, and you could see that I could barely keep that thing under control when I first got it. I was side slipping into trees, I was slamming it into the ground, I was trying to go through gaps that were too small and just bashing into things, and it was quite tricky, and no amount of me trying or any spotters telling me where to go was going to help with that. So let's have a look at the Mob 7 itself then. It's a pretty sturdy frame, this one that comes with it. I think this is the V4 frame, it's pretty solid. It's got a relatively solid canopy on it as well. So what have I broken in all those crashes? Well, it's always been flyable. I've never actually completely ruined it. At one point, I smashed this little antenna off. These are very easy to break, these little tiny video transmitter antennas. I went and soldered that back up, shortened it, and put it back on. I think that lasted another 2 or 3 flights before it was caught in the prop and shredded, and I was flying it around my garden, and the video reception was terrible, and I realised that there was just a tiny little bit sticking out with some wire hanging off, and it wasn't doing all very well. I'm not sure what settings I've got on Betaflight. I think I'm running 100 or 200 milliwatts of video transmitter, so having an antenna on it is pretty important. point, if you rip the antenna off entirely, you might cook your video transmitter. So if I were to turn that experience into a tip for you, carry at least one of these spare sort of little dipoles in your flight bag so that you can, like having spare props, just whip it on if you smash the antenna. The way they normally break actually is this teeny weeny little end bit, after getting bashed around too much, just fractures and sort of gets fatigued and falls off. So what else has happened with this that has damaged it? You can see that, I mean, it gets used as a lawnmower a lot of the time. I'll quite happily fly it into the grass in the garden and perhaps use turtle mode to flip it back over. That's not ideal, but it's only grass. It can usually cope with that. So it's getting absolutely covered in sort of grass, sometimes wet grass, and it doesn't seem to mind. I've not broken any props yet. I've not cracked the frame yet, but what I have managed to do is split the battery holder. So underneath there's these two little bars that hold the battery in. Unfortunately on this quad, what I've been doing is I've been using these batteries. These are big 850 batteries. They're very heavy, they're very thick compared to the 450s that it comes with and is tuned for. They're much, much thicker and much, much bigger. And the way to get these big guys into the frame, if you want a few extra minutes of flight time, they run for about 6-7 minutes, is to just brute force them in. And I had intended to take the Dremel and just Dremel out the frame a little bit to accommodate these bigger batteries, and then I'd stick a tiny bit of tape on my other batteries. The problem with those batteries is they've already fractured the frame. There's some sort of fracture marks on it. There are 4 bars, 2 at the bottom and 2 at the top, that hold this thing in place. One of them has cracked off entirely. The other one is sort of on its way to falling apart. Yeah, if I put my normal batteries in this now, they can be a little bit loose. They usually stay where they are, and I'm not flying it miles away. It's only a whoop. So I'll go and get it if it feels like it's flying a bit funny. I have flown it a couple of times with the battery just dangling off the bottom, to be fair, and it did fly okay. You can tell when that happens and bring it back in safely, but it's by no means uncontrollable. So there we are. If you're looking for something that's an absolute tank and you're looking for an alternative to the Tiny Hawk kits and things like that, which are sort of solid, chunky drones to be flown indoors, have a look at the Mob 7. I've absolutely thrashed it, and it seems to be completely fine. It's taken minimal damage in the 6 weeks of endless crashing I've done. So I suggest you pick one of these up if you want something that is hard as nails that you can learn FPV on without buying props in the bag load. Thank you very much for watching that. I've got plenty more tips for the Mob 7. If you're interested in seeing the difference in flight time between those big 850 batteries and the normal batteries that you put in it, the 450s, I've got a video for that. That's going to be here at the end. I've also got other tips for flying this indoors and a video about what you need to do if you're going to prepare your house for your maiden indoor flight. So have a look at those. They'll be coming up next, and I'll see you in the next one.